First of all, this week's parsha is Parshas Chaye Sarah. Chaye Sarah literally means the life of Sarah. Interestingly, perhaps somewhat ironically, the parsha opens up after, in the story, after Sarah passed away, and it's telling us about the passing of Sarah and what happens after that, but it's referred to as Chaye Sarah, the life of Sarah, for a number of reasons. The most simple, obvious, face value reason is that the parsha, the Torah portion, opens up telling us that the life of Sarah was 127 years. She lived 127 years. So it says, Vayiyu Chaye Sarah, and the life of Sarah was 127 years. So it's called Chaye Sarah because those are those sort of opening, distinguishing words. Obviously, it's a lot more than that, and there's an incredibly profound message there. And maybe I'll quickly now just summarize it briefly in a minute or so, because it's not what we're focusing on this week, but it is so important. And that is that in some ways, the evidence of a person's life, the evidence of the value of what a person achieved during their life, often shows up after they pass away. Sarah created a legacy. Sarah's life was committed to doing things that were meaningful and had purpose. And in doing so, she created a legacy that in some ways, really, her life only started after she passed away, because that's when her legacy really took off and picked up steam, and also that's when you really have the evidence of the fact that her life was truly valuable and meaningful, in that there was a legacy that continued after she passed away. So it's after she passes away that we really get to see what her life was. So this is why the Torah portion that begins immediately following her passing is actually called the life of Sarah. Now, we're going to have a look at the Zohar's interpretation, or an interpretation that the Zohar gives to one of the following psukim, one of the early verses in this week's Torah portion. And then we're going to have a problem, because this interpretation of the Zohar seems to make it difficult to understand something else that the Torah says on the topic, based on another interpretation of the Zohar. It makes things difficult to understand. And once we understand how there's actually no conflict here at all, it makes perfect sense. The clarity that this is going to bring is so important. And the truth is that when it comes to this idea, the idea that we're going to be focusing on that's going to bring the clarity and the resolution between these two different statements of the Zohar, what's really important here is not just learning and understanding it, because this is the kind of idea that a person can learn and understand and lecture about and teach about and preach about and spend their whole life not believing it all the way deep down in here so that it actually shows up in the way we live. And the irony that's just occurring to me now is that in many ways that is kind of the whole point of what it's telling us. But let's see. Let's start and see how we go. So, the Torah tells us about how long Sarah lived, and then it says, Vatomas Sarah B'Kiryas Arba Aleph. And then Ayin, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that looks right. Ooh, sorry. So now we have the pasuk says, "Vatama Sarah, and Sarah passed away, Bekiryas Arba, in this, let's call it, town of 4, and that name is a whole thing. He Chevron, which is Chevron. So Kiryas Arba and Chevron are synonymous. She passed away in Chevron. So now the Zohar comes along and tells us that Sarah and Abraham, figuratively, in general, represent, and this is a rule in general, and it shows up in many different places, in many different ways in the story, in the various parts of the stories of Abraham and Sarah, that... Is that a white erase marker? Excellent.
Sorry, you said the Zohar says this? Like when you're about to...
Yes.
Uh-huh.
So, Abraham represents figuratively, in general, the soul, the neshama, and Sarah represents figuratively the body, the guf. Right? And they are a couple, married. They become a composite entity, just like in a person, the soul and the body become a composite entity through the duration of our life. So that's one thing that the Zohar tells us. And interpreting this pasuk, it tells us that Vatomas Sarah, the body, passed away. Bekiryas Arba, Arba 4, the body which is composed of 4 kinds of matter. The word that's used in Hebrew is yosodos, 4 yosodos. In general, people translate yosodos in this context in English to elements. And the truth is, I think it's actually a good translation, but the problem with that is there is another kind of element that we use the same word for, and then it can create this sort of misconception that they are competing views of reality when I think they're just 2 different kinds of element. Right? The elements in the periodic table are chemical elements, substances. These 4 yesodis, these 4 elements are, let's say, perhaps a way of describing them is energetic elements. So there are these 4 yesodos: Eish, fire; Mayim, water; Ruach, air or spirit; Afar, and dirt. And everything that exists physically has different combinations of these 4 energetic elements. So the body, which is comprised of these 4 elements, passed away. He Chevron, Chibur means connection. Chevron, they were attached. They had been attached to each other. Or the body had been attached to the soul, let's say. The body had been attached to the soul. And then the pasuk continues, Vayavai Abraham, and Abraham came, lispod Sarah v'livkosa, to mourn Sarah and to cry about her passing. When we bring it back to this interpretation, it says, and the soul, Abraham representing the soul, came to mourn the passing of the body. Because they had been Chevron, they had been attached together as a composite entity. Now part of this composite was gone, the body was deceased, and so the soul comes along, or the soul was mourning and crying over the loss of the body that had been attached to it. And even after a person passes away, there is still a connection between the body and the soul. It's obviously the nature and dynamics of that connection are very different. This is why there's such a thing as visiting a grave. Because the body is in that place and there's still a connection between the body and the soul. So that's that. This is the Zohar's interpretation of this pasuk. It's talking about Avram and Sarah, Avram representing the soul, Sarah representing the body. All good and fine. Now, where the issue is going to arise is when we, looking back, we know that when Sarah wanted to send away Yishmael because he was being a negative influence on Yitzchak, keeping in mind Yishmael was not Sarah's son, he was Avram's son. Yitzchak and Yishmael were half brothers. They shared a father, Abraham, they had different mothers. So when Yishmael was being a terrible influence on Yitzchak. He was violent, aggressive, he was being a bad influence. Sarah wanted to send him away so he wouldn't continue to have this negative effect on Yitzchak. Avram didn't want to send him away, it's his son. And Hashem came along and says to Avraham, Avinu, Kol asher toimel lecha Sarah, Shma b'koila. Whatever Sarah tells you, listen. Now, in the literal sense, it's not hard to understand. Hashem is telling Avraham that he should listen to his wife, to Sarah. Whatever she says, you should do. When we come back to Zohar's interpretation of Avraham as the soul and Sarah as the body, now, just to be clear, when we say that the Zohar is bringing here an interpretation, it doesn't mean that the Zohar is replacing the face value meaning of the pasuk. Right? There is an expression that says, Ein mikra yotze midei pshutei. A verse cannot be taken out of its simple meaning. Which means that when we have additional interpretations, whether it's a medrash, whether it's Zohar, whatever it is, these interpretations are not coming to take away from the face value meaning. They're offering additional layers of meaning. So Zohar now if both layers of meaning are true, then they both have to work with everything that it says in Torah. Right? If what Zohar says here, it's like, oh wow, that's like so cute. But then when we learn something else in Torah, it's like, this doesn't match anymore. The resolution to that is not, oh, Zohar was just saying something cute so you could say it at your parsha table. It doesn't really fit with what the Torah said over there, but don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. It's just like two different things. It works over there, it doesn't work over here. Then it's not real. Right? When it comes to an example of this, and I think the reason I want to give this example is because I think here it's more tangible and maybe it's easier to understand this idea. You know, something that Elon Musk said once, and I'm not saying it's true because he said it, taking what he said on its merits. He said, the only true laws are the laws of physics. All other laws are negotiable. An alternative version of this from someone allegedly who lived in this neighborhood a generation or two ago. So there's no such thing as a place that you can't park. Every piece of earth is a parking spot. Some parking spots are more expensive than others. Right? So what Elon Musk is getting at here is maybe there's a law on the books that says such and such. And the truth is that what this expression ties in very closely to something that it says in Hayom Yom. The fact that there is a law on the books that says whatever it says, you're not allowed to do this, you have to do that, whatever. First of all, there was a beginning point to that law. It wasn't always the law. It wasn't that law until it was written down or decided and voted on or whatever, depending on the system. Which means it's not an absolute law. It wasn't, and then it is. And then it became, and now it is. If it wasn't and now it is, that could change too. It's negotiable. If you can convince a sufficient number of people in the government to change the law, you can change the law. It's not actually true. It's something that the system dictates that at this moment we have to apply and work according to. But it's not an absolute truth at all. It's negotiable. You cannot negotiate with gravity. It doesn't work that way. Gravity is, period. If gravity is creating an outcome that doesn't work for us, then we have to figure out a way to change the outcome. And the way to change the outcome is not to go and negotiate with gravity, it's to figure out how to work with gravity to produce a different outcome. It's not negotiable. It just is. Right? You can't change that. If a law of physics applies in one place and then somewhere else it's not true anymore, then it's not a real law. It's not true. Now, sometimes the law might not apply to produce the same outcome in a different circumstance. Acceleration due to gravity on the moon, let's say, is different to acceleration due to gravity on Earth. That's not because something changed about the nature of gravity. That's because it's the same exact laws of the attraction of matter being applied in different circumstances with different sized bodies of matter, and so the force of attraction is different. But there's nothing that changed here. We didn't change the rules. The rules are the same. The same rules applied in different circumstances produce different outcomes. If the rule changed, it wouldn't be real. It wouldn't be, at least, let's say, it wouldn't be absolutely true. Right? When it comes to math, you see a similar thing. That you learn the basics of math, in first grade, second grade, wherever you're learning 1 + 1 = 2, and the very basics. What you learn in first grade as a subject quickly stops to be a subject or a topic. Right? The first time when you start learning algebra, it's like algebra is this whole topic that you're learning and how algebra works, and it can be a lot overwhelming at first until the penny drops and you get it. And then by the time you've progressed a few years past when you first learn algebra is not a topic anymore. It's just that everything you learn in math, algebra is just a basic skill that you use. And it's still the same. The things we learned in first grade in mathematics are still true when a person's doing rocket science. The same things are true. The same algebra is true. The same laws of trigonometry are true. These things don't change. And that's why we continue using them as we advance, because they're still true. And whatever field of math you're learning, the things that you learned in first grade are still equally true. This is true in math and physics, are, I think, perhaps the places where it's the most just obvious and tangible. Right? If it's true, it doesn't change. If it changes, it was never absolutely true. So here, the same thing is obviously true in Torah. The truth is it's the reverse. Torah is the first time that this was true, and then from Torah, Hashem brought into being this world, and it's true here as well. So the real direction is not that, just like it's true in math and physics, it's also true in Torah. The real way this works is, just like it's true in Torah, it's also true in math and physics. The difference is that, for most of us, we can relate to this tangibly in math and physics more closely, because we're human beings, and then we translate it back to Torah. So if something is actually true in Torah, then it's true everywhere. The way that shows up might change, but if it's a rule, it's true. So if we're saying, the Zohar tells us that Abraham is let's say, a figurative representation of the soul, and Sarah is a figurative representation of the body, and now we know that Hashem told Avraham Avinu, whatever Sarah tells you, listen to her voice. If this is still true, that means Hashem is telling the soul, the neshama, whatever the body tells you, listen to it. What are we supposed to do with that? Right? We spend our whole lives learning and trying to make things real and integrate them and become less materialistic and less just drawn after the body. And as far as I'm concerned, you're welcome to come and join. But, right, so we want to be less materialistic and more focused on the soul and more soul-centered. And now we have a posuk in the Torah that, based on the Zohar's interpretation, Hashem is telling the soul, whatever the body tells you, listen to it. What are we supposed to do now? Are we supposed to become more body-oriented or more soul-oriented? More materialistic, more spiritualistic? Do we somehow do both at the same time? How does that work? The answer in short form, which probably is going to mean nothing, is probably all of the above. The question is, okay, what does that mean? What are we supposed to do with this? So we're going to take a look at another verse. There's a verse that the Torah says, Kisira chamor seinacha. Revetz tachas masai. Oops, sorry. V'chodalta me'azov. Right? Azov. Ta'azov. Imai. We're going to talk about an interpretation of the Baal Shem Tov of this verse, and this interpretation actually, and the message here happens to be something that I have been extremely focused on and passionate about for the past couple of years. This is sort of what I'm all about at the moment.
This is from the Parsha?
No, this verse is not from the Parsha. This is from much later on. But we're going to now interpret this according to the Baal Shem Tov and see how we're going to understand the two together. This is also going to be something that at first is going to be like, huh? But once we're going to understand both of these, they very much go hand in hand. They're very strongly aligned. So this verse at face value means, Ki sireh, when you will see, chamor seinacha, the donkey of your enemy, rovetz tachas masai, crouching under its load. And it's talking about very simply, you're walking down the street and you see a friend, and I guess today it would be a car, probably more frequently than it would be a donkey, but someone's walking with their donkey and they have this big package that the donkey's carrying on its back, and the donkey's really struggling and the package is falling off, and right, and this is someone that you don't like. So when you see the donkey of your enemy struggling under its load, and your natural instinct is to refrain from helping, the pasuk says, no, azov tazov imoy, you have to help. So that's the literal meaning. Now we're going to put in the Baal Shem Tov's interpretation here. So chamor, which means donkey, in Hebrew, if we remove the vav, which is essentially a vowel, chomer means matter. Chumrius means materialness. So now the Baal Shem Tov says, Ki sireh, when you will see chamor, your own matter, your material, your body, your physicality, soinacha, as your enemy. Why? Because we're learning about spirituality and about the soul. And the body, that's just physical, that's material. Who cares about the body? We're focused on the soul. So Ki sireh, when you will see chamor, your material body, seinacha, as your enemy, rovetz tachas masai, and it is struggling under its load. Right, this pasuk is not talking about a person who sees their own donkey struggling under, or someone else's donkey struggling under their own load. If you hire your enemy because they were the best person for the job to carry your stuff on his donkey, and his donkey is carrying my stuff, and I view this person as an enemy, and the donkey is struggling, of course I'm going to help. Why? Because it's my load. It's my stuff. The Torah says, no. This is not about when it's your stuff. That's a no-brainer. If you see the donkey of your enemy struggling under its load, his load, not yours, and therefore you think, this has got nothing to do with me, I've got nothing to gain, I don't like this person, I'm just going to pretend I didn't see and keep walking. Or maybe if I'm really not nice, I'm going to show that I do see, and I'm going to keep walking and make a point of emphasizing it. Ouch. The pasuk says, no. Stop and help. So now this pasuk is speaking to us let's assume that we are making an effort to be more soul-centric, more spiritually oriented. And we view our primary identity as the soul, etc. So the Pasuk speaking to that part of us, Kisira Chamor, if you see the material, your material body, Sonacha, as your enemy, and it is struggling under its load, right? The body, our bodies have a lot to deal with. A huge amount to deal with. And it's not always easy, to say the least. Now, I'm going to take a minute or a few to talk about what this really means here. When we say the body struggling under its load, what are the kind of things, in what ways is the body involved in Avodas Hashem? Now, the truth is the body's involved in all of our relationship and service of Hashem. Most mitzvahs we do involve our body. Maybe there's a physical mitzvah I have to do and it's hard for me. Whether it's because I'm just physically exhausted or I have some sort of deep resistance to it, it's a challenge. But it also, this goes to things that are much less obvious, and this is something that is so important and so overlooked. And this is explicit in the Sikha. The Rebbe spends quite a large percentage of the Sikha focusing on this. And that is, there are what are called Chovos Halavavos. There's a sefer, a book called Chovos Halavavos. What the term Chovos Halavavos means? Chovos means obligations, Halavavos of the hearts. Lighting Shabbos candles is not an obligation of the heart, it's an obligation of the hands. Putting on tefillin is not an obligation of the heart, it's an obligation of the arm, the hands, the head, etc. There are obligations of the heart, and they include loving Hashem, Avas Hashem, Yiras Hashem, being in awe of Hashem. Now, it's very easy. There are two mistakes that it's very easy to make, and they're both big mistakes. Now, when I say big mistakes, that doesn't mean it's not understandable or reasonable that a person will make these mistakes. It's very understandable and reasonable, and that's why the Rebbe has to come and point out and let us know, that's a mistake. It's a mistake that people who are really putting in effort to the right things in the right places in the right ways can very easily make. One of those is, I would say the most obvious version of this is, some of you, I don't know to what degree everyone here is familiar with the term, but there's a term, Yirah Shamayim, right, which means fear of heaven or being in awe of Hashem. And generally when someone will say, oh, that person's a real Yirah Shamayim, what do they usually mean? What does that term usually mean? When a person says that term in conversation, what does it usually mean? What's it usually a description of? Usually, for most people, when they say that, what they mean is that person adheres to Torah, the requirements of Torah, the guidelines of Torah, to halacha, to minhag, very, very closely. Person keeps Torah mitzvahs very correctly. That's what people usually mean when they say Yirah Shamayim. It's not what Yirah Shamayim means at all. Yirah Shamayim means fear of heaven. It doesn't mean performance. It doesn't mean doing anything. Yirah, fear, is an emotion. It's not an action. Now, if someone really feels an awe is in AWE, of Hashem, their adherence to the requirements and guidelines of Torah is likely going to be solid. So if someone is a Yirei Shamayim, if someone is in awe of Hashem, chances are you're going to see it in their performance. And so this is where that conflation comes from. But Yirei Shamayim, awe of heaven, does not mean compliance. It does not mean behavior. It does not mean action. It is an emotion. There is a mitzvah to be in awe of Hashem. That mitzvah is not to do all the things. We already have, first of all, there's a mitzvah for each thing that we have to do. And we already have other places in the Torah where it tells us to do all the things collectively. The mitzvah of being in awe of Hashem is a mitzvah to feel this emotion of awe. A-W-E. The mitzvah to love Hashem is a mitzvah. We are being commanded to feel this emotion. We are not being commanded to behave as though we love Hashem. Right now, it makes a lot of sense, again, first of all, because if someone loves Hashem, there's a certain way they're going to behave. So if they behave that way, it's easy to conflate the behavior that would result from loving Hashem, to conflate that behavior with loving Hashem. But they're two separate things. And you know what? A person can behave as though they love Hashem and as though they are in awe of Hashem and not feel either of those emotions. Now, if a person is doing that because that's what they can do, amazing. Good for them for having that commitment. But let's not make the mistake of thinking that that behavior is yiras shamayim, fear of heaven, awe of heaven. Let's not make the mistake of conflating the behavior with loving Hashem. Love is an emotion, not an action. So how do we do the mitzvah of loving Hashem, of being in awe of Hashem, particularly if we're talking about how the whole point of mitzvahs is to do them in the body? The truth is we didn't even really get into that today so much. Just very briefly, there's a reason that, in the order of, let's say, creation, there is what's called Seder Hishtalshelus, which is, let's say, a series, an order in which different layers of reality were brought into being. This spiritual evolution or devolution, where the first layer of reality is deeply aware of the full truth of the big picture and of Hashem. And there's no sense of self. And then there's another layer of reality where the awareness is turned down a little and there's this beginning of sense of self. And then the awareness gets turned down further in the next layer of reality and the sense of self increases, etc. Until we get here where the actual natural awareness of the full truth of reality and of spirituality and divinity is minimal, close to zero. The sense of self is near absolute, and we have to work to start to shift both of those things. If Hashem just wanted awareness of of divinity, he would have created the first layer of reality and stopped. Angels exist in all of these intermediate layers of reality. If Hashem wanted spiritual entities to feel this burning love and passionate love for Hashem, he would have created those first layers of reality, created the angels, and stopped. He didn't. He kept going until he got here. Right? And there's an expression, right? This is perhaps one of the face value outcomes of Murphy's Law, is that the expression goes, you always find something in the last place that you look. Question. Has anyone here ever been looking for something and then found it and then kept on looking for it after you found it? No. You always find something in the last place you look, because when you find it, you stop looking. Now, obviously, this is not to take away from the expression. We understand what it means. What it means is, what the intent of the expression is, you always find something in the last place you think to look, and again, it's still the same thing, but really, let's say a less pretty but more correct way of putting it would be you always find something in the 100th place you think to look, or the 10th place you think to look, or after you thought to look in a bunch of other places. That's what it really means. Why? Because when you find something, stop looking. Why? Because the reason we were looking was in order to find it. So when we find it, we stop looking. If you see someone, you walk into someone's kitchen and you observe them, and they're picking things up and putting things down and opening and closing drawers and opening and closing cabinets, and they're clearly looking for something, and you have no idea what they're looking for. You know how you can tell what they're looking for without asking them? Continue to observe, and when you see them pick something up and stop looking, looks like that was the thing they were looking for, right? Because they were looking and looking and looking until they found that thing. When they found that thing, they stopped looking. Why? Because that was the reason they were looking. And you always find what you're looking for in the last place you look, because you stopped looking when you find it. The looking was a means. The end, the objective was find this thing. Find my keys, find my watch, whatever it is. In order to find it, I need to search. So I will search. And when I'm done searching, when I find it, I will stop searching, because the point of searching was in order to find it. If I want to win an Olympic gold medal in whatever it is, I'm going to train and push myself, assuming that I had started this a couple decades earlier. If I get to the point where I win that gold medal, and this is almost never true, but let's say hypothetically that really was the thing that I wanted. I just wanted the gold medal, and there was nothing beyond that I was interested in, and there were no underlying things that I wasn't aware of, etc. I really just wanted the gold medal. Once I win the gold medal, I'm going to stop putting in the work to win a gold medal, because I got the thing I wanted. If Hashem wanted spirituality, he would have created spirituality and stopped. Hashem created the various layers of reality, and the spiritual layers came first until Hashem got to this physical, material, tangible layer of reality, and this is where it stopped. Why? Because this was the whole point. All those other layers of reality were a means to an end. They were intermediate stages of reality in order to get here. This is the one Hashem is interested in. If angels were more interesting to Hashem than if spiritual angels that don't even have physical bodies were more interesting to Hashem than human beings where the soul is enmeshed with this physical, tangible, fallible body, an animal soul, Hashem would have created those and wouldn't have kept going until he got here. But this is where it's at. Hashem kept creating till he got here, because the thing that Hashem is interested in is the work, the achievement, the journey of the soul enmeshed in this composite entity with the human animal soul and the physical human body. With everything that comes with that. This is the point. This is where it's at. And this is why in general mitzvahs involve the body. Because the point of this all is to integrate divinity into the material, into our physical bodies, into the world around us through our physical bodies, through actions that we do. The point, the objective, the value of all of the spirituality that exists is all in order to facilitate the integration of spirit and divinity into physical matter, into our physical bodies. So in truth, our bodies actually and this gets complex and messy. You know what's a good metaphor for this? Let's take food bloggers, right? Go back a few years, they were, the whole rage. You have someone who is, a food blogger. This is what they do. This is how they make a living, talking about food and recipes and cooking online. But there's a food blogger who's very unique, and they have like a real specific niche. And what they do, what their brand, the thing that they do that people come to watch and to observe is not that they try to make the most delicious food or the most, aesthetically pleasing food or all of the above. The thing that they do is to try to make the best possible food out of the worst possible ingredients. So this person goes into the grocery store and, they take you for a vlog, they take you shopping with them to the grocery store with their phone or camera, and they're looking around, and maybe they're going to make some, carrot cake or something. And they go to the carrots and the carrot section, and they're like, oh wow, these carrots look delicious, they're fresh and crunchy. Like, yeah, that's not really what I want. Let me dig through and see. And then they get to the bottom of the pile, and there's this like bunch of carrots that were supposed to be taken out 3 weeks ago that they forgot. And it's like not quite moldy, but they're like soggy and bendy and gross. And they find these carrots at the bottom, and they're like, yes, this is what I'm looking for. Gross, bendy, soggy, stale, nasty carrots. This is so exciting. Why? Because the thing that this person is all about is taking ingredients that are as minimally appealing as possible and making good food from it. This is what they do. So now this person has two recognitions at the same time. They're aware that these carrots are gross. This person doesn't like have a misunderstanding of food and think that these are really good carrots. They acknowledge like, wow, these carrots at the top are like so fresh and crunchy and they look really good. They've got great color. I could almost even smell them. Wow, amazing carrots. Those carrots are really amazing. They don't interest me much. Why? Because I'm excited by like the gross stuff. That's the challenge. That's where that's what they're all about. So when they find soggy, bendy carrots, that's super exciting for them. When they find ingredients that are like not quite off, but like really not appealing, that's exciting. Right? This is not that the person doesn't understand the value inherent. There's objective quality of the ingredients. This person agrees the quality of the fresh, crunchy carrots is far superior to the quality of the bendy, soft, soggy carrots. And because they're aware that these... Sorry if this is a bit...
No, it's just...
I thought it would be pretty tame. It's just carrots. The quality, knowing and recognizing that the quality of these carrots is far inferior is exactly what's exciting to them. Right? And this is a similar thing here. It's true that being more attuned to spirituality is superior to being less attuned than spirituality. But when there is something that is inherently less attuned to spirituality, it's objectively, in terms of the objective value of its characteristics, it's inferior. It is. Well, no one's arguing with that. But it's much more exciting and interesting and personally valuable to Hashem. You know, if someone has two pieces of jewelry, one is like, you know, something with tons of diamonds and whatever, and it's worth 10 grand on the market, and they have another piece of jewelry that they wouldn't be able to get someone to come and take for free unless they paid them for the time to come and get it. It's literally not worth 5 cents on the market. But this piece of jewelry that's not worth 5 cents on the market has extraordinary sentimental value. Maybe it was, you know, it's from their great-grandparent, and, you know, before they got taken away in the Holocaust, they snuck it to their child, and then the child brought it out, and this is like what they have left from their ancestors. No one's disagreeing with the fact that this piece of jewelry has 0 cents market value. That's a fact. It's a piece of plastic. It doesn't look nice. No one's disagreeing. That being said, if this person had to choose which one of these am I going to hold on to, that piece of jewelry that has 0 market value or the piece of jewelry that's worth 10 grand, they're holding on to that one because this is from their great-grandparents. This has a value that exceeds all the money in the world. They're not delusional. It's not like, oh, I think this is a objectively more valuable piece of jewelry. They know it's not. But in terms of their personal, what the value that it holds to them personally, it's incomparably more valuable. Being more spiritually attuned is superior, but the thing that's less spiritually attuned is much more interesting and exciting to Hashem, and the opportunity there is where it's really at. Integrating divinity, godliness, increasing the spiritual attunement of something that is inherently not spiritually attuned, that's where things are really beautiful to Hashem. The body is way more valuable to Hashem than the soul. Not because it's superior, objectively superior. It's not. It's objectively inferior, but it's much more personally valuable to Hashem. Now, if I were to ask you which one of these two pieces of jewelry is more valuable, someone who only thinks in terms of market value will say the real piece of jewelry is more valuable. But I didn't say more valuable on the market. I said which one's more valuable. And the answer to that is, well, it depends. To this person, it's way more valuable. And frankly, to someone else, it might be more valuable too, because if they get hold of it, they could sell it. The person will pay more for that to get it back than the most beautiful piece of real jewelry in the world, if they can. So, objectively, in terms of the objective value of the characteristics, the soul is superior to the body. The body is more, let's say, personally valuable to Hashem than the soul is. What's a truer metric of value? Objective value of characteristics or personal value to Hashem? The personal value to Hashem is the more real metric of value. So ultimately, the body is more valuable than the soul. Not because its characteristics are inherently superior, but because they're not. That's the irony. Right? And that's what I like about the metaphor of the person who's shopping for this food. The reason that the soggy, bendy, stale carrots are more interesting is because they are inferior. And the more soggy and bendy and stale they are, the more exciting they are to this person. Because this is their thing. Making good food out of nasty ingredients. The nastier the ingredients, the better it is. Assuming that there's still the possibility of working with them. The body, physical matter, is the most beautiful, exciting thing that exists as far as Hashem's concerned. But the question is, are we going to make use of it? Right? If the person takes those soggy, bendy carrots home and leaves them on the counter until they actually grow mold, it's like, well, there's nothing nice about that. But if they can take those and turn them into some delicious food that's delicious and appealing, and anyone who tastes it raves about it, that's good. That's exciting, that's interesting, it's novel. And so Hashem says to Avram, to the soul, whatever the body tells you, listen. What does that mean? It means Hashem is telling us, the soul, or a soul-oriented person, if you look at your material body as your enemy, it's just physical, it's material, it's not spiritually attuned, and therefore when it's struggling you don't want to help it, that's a mistake. That's where it's at, that's the whole point. Right, now coming back to these mitzvahs, let's say the mitzvah of loving Hashem, the mitzvah to love Hashem is not, it doesn't say in the pasuk, it says, V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha, and you shall love Hashem your God. It does not say, and you shall behave as though you love Hashem your God. Or you shall behave in a way that demonstrates that you love Hashem. It doesn't say that. It says, and you shall love. Love is an emotion. So if it's an emotion, how we do it with our body, depending on a person's understanding of emotions, that may be a bigger or smaller question. The Rebbe says in Hayom Yom, addresses this very, very directly and explicitly. And says that in general, mitzvahs, many mitzvahs, most mitzvahs have a shir, an amount. Right? In order to say an after blessing, a bracha achrona, there's a certain amount of food you have to eat. In order to put on tefillin, for tefillin to be kosher, they have to be a certain size, etc. Most mitzvahs have some sort of quantity measurement involved. Whether it's in time, in space, in mass, whatever. Sometimes all of the above. So what's the measurement of loving Hashem? What's the measurement of being in awe of Hashem? And the Rebbe says the measurement is the amount, the extent to which you have to love Hashem or be in awe of Hashem to fully, properly, completely fulfill this mitzvah is, these are the Rebbe's words, Asher yurgesh behergesh gufni, till you feel a bodily sensation. When you see someone who you love dearly, who you haven't seen for years, you're going to feel it in your body. You know, some people, we're going to be able to hear it from 3 blocks away also. But you're going to feel it in your body. Your heart rate is going to shift. The nervous energy in your body is going to shift. Your facial expressions are going to shift. Everything about you is going to change. Why? Because this is real. And your body responds to it. A proper, complete love for Hashem is one that we feel in a physical, bodily sensation. That's what loving Hashem means. Feeling a bodily sensation of love. Being in awe of Hashem means feeling bodily sensations of awe. Not behaving in a way that resembles or expresses or is evidence of the fact that we are in awe. The mitzvah is to feel that awe and to feel it to the extent that it is a physical, bodily sensation.
But that physical sensation, for myself, I don't think I can experience it like every second of the day. Maybe during davening, in the best days. So is that something that our objective should be to feel that constantly or often or?
That's a really good question. Should our objective be, I guess I want to maybe rephrase the question slightly and tell me if I'm on point. If I don't feel a bodily sensation of love for Hashem all day, does that mean I'm not there yet? Yeah? The answer is yes and no. Technically, objectively, the answer is no. We still have a way to go. In reality, it doesn't mean no. Why? What do I mean? What I mean is that we are not expected to achieve everything to the ultimate degree of completion today. That's what we're here for. If the extent to which I've developed this today is more than it was yesterday or more than it was a week ago or a month ago, and I'm on that upward trajectory, then I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Yes, there's still room to go because the hypothetical perfect state of this or complete state, I'm not there yet, which means I still have what to aspire to, I still have what to work towards, but it doesn't mean that I'm failing to do what I'm supposed to do today, because maybe realistically, you can't, not maybe, it is absolutely technically impossible to get there in a day. And it's probably absolutely technically impossible to get there in a year or in 10 years, or maybe ever. Maybe it's something that we just get closer and closer to or less and less distant from. It's like an asymptote on a graph, but you never actually reach it. Perhaps. I think that I'm pretty confident the answer to that is yes, it's true, but I'm saying perhaps to be conservative. Right? So on one hand, yes, it means we're not there completely. On the other hand, this is exactly what we're here for, to work on this. And if we're making progress and getting a little bit more, making a bit more progress in that direction, that is exactly what this is about. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask what you just said. So the struggle to develop this is the purpose. Is that? No.
It's not that it's no, I would say yes and no. So there are dual purposes. One purpose is to actually achieve it to the extent that we can. There is also purpose in, I would say, the journey rather than the struggle. And the reason that I'm saying journey rather than struggle is because, from person to person, and then for any given person within different mini journeys or different parts of their journey, both qualitatively and quantitatively, there are some things that are more of a struggle, some things that are less. Some things where sometimes are more of a struggle and sometimes are more of a less. That doesn't, or sometimes are less. It doesn't mean that the part that's less of a struggle doesn't have the value or the purpose. So I'm saying the purpose is in the journey rather than in the struggle itself. And the one thing about this that's really important to the point of clarity here is that it's not virtuous, and this is a mistake that a lot of people make. It's not virtuous to make things difficult. It's like, yeah, now it's a struggle. Yeah, virtue in struggle. There's virtue in doing what we have to do and struggling when there's a struggle. There is zero virtue in making things more difficult for ourselves than they need to be. That's counterproductive and it's a bad idea, period. Right? So that's just the distinction I wanted to make. There's value in the journey, there's purpose in the journey, and when the journey involves struggle, there's purpose in the struggle. But there's no inherent purpose in struggle per se, to the extent that there's virtue in pursuing struggle. Make sense?
Yes.
Right? Because I could stand here and bang my head against the wall for the rest of my life. It's a struggle to keep banging, but hey, it's a struggle, there's purpose. It doesn't work that way. Right?
Nice.
And obviously that's an extreme example, but just to illustrate that this is a mistake that people can make with the best of intentions. It's not virtuous to pursue difficulty.
That's a great
It's virtuous to travel forward, and when it's difficult, to keep on going. Actually, for what it's worth, compliments to Chris Williamson for that example. And this is an idea. He's not Jewish, but he's a smart guy. He has a podcast called Modern Wisdom. And this is something that he has talked about and clarified. Anyway, so we have to now tie things up very quickly. This pasuk is telling us, if you look at your body, if the soul looks at the body and sees the body is struggling and it's having a hard time really being able to feel love for Hashem as a physical sensation, fear of Hashem as a physical sensation, or struggling with just practical things, and the soul looks and is like, Tachas Masai, this is the body's problem. This is the material body. It's my enemy. I don't care about the body. Ew, physical, material, lowly. That's no attunement to divinity. There's no value there. I don't care about that. That's its struggle. Masai. And the soul, or the soul-oriented part of the person, wants to say, that's just the body's struggle. That's its struggle. It's just the body. Body is material. Its enemy has no value. I'm going to abandon it. The pasuk says, no. Ozev tazavima. You go and help it. Why? Because that's the whole point. When our body is telling us, I'm hungry, I need to eat, I'm tired, I need to sleep, it's not virtuous to say, no, I'm going to deny this. That's just a bodily need. It doesn't make any sense. First of all, it doesn't make sense practically because the cost of doing that will invariably outweigh the benefit, with maybe some very few specific exceptions, but in general, the cost of not meeting our body's needs, the cost almost always outweighs the benefit. And second of all, it's just coming from a understandable misunderstanding of the way things are. Yes, the body is inherently spiritually inferior, but that's where it's at. Hashem's more interested in the body than in the soul. And it says that when Mashiach comes, the soul is going to get its energy from the body. Right? And this goes back to what I was saying before. What's a truer metric of value? The inherent objective value of the qualities of the characteristics, or the value to Hashem? The value to Hashem is the truer metric of value. If something's more valuable to Hashem, at the deepest, let's say at the deepest layers of perception and understanding, that makes it the most valuable, period. So if the body is more interesting to Hashem than the soul is, it's inherently more valuable, technically. Now we don't see that, but when Mashiach comes, we will, because we're going to see the full truth. And when Mashiach comes, now the body is made to be alive by the soul. When Mashiach comes, the soul is going to get its energy from the body, because that's where the real truth is. Hashem's value, Hashem's interest, Hashem's desire, Hashem's personal evaluation is the truest value. And so the Pasuk says, don't neglect to take care of your body. That's a mistake. You're here to take care of your body. And so Hashem said to Avram, exactly to the soul, when the body tells you something, listen. Now, here's a mistake that causes a lot of confusion, is that people think, oh, I want to eat ice cream on Yom Kippur. Hashem said the soul should listen to the body. Technically, when we're talking about this interpretation, what does the verse say? It says, whatever the body tells you, listen to it. It doesn't say you always have to do exactly what it says. But the body, and this is when we can get over the barriers to this, you can come to actually see and experience this relatively quickly when we get over this distortion of the value and the role of the body, etc., and stop thinking that it's the enemy. If we listen, if we can be attuned to our bodies and actually start to really be present in them and to feel what they're telling us, probably 99 times out of 100, our body is going to give us a better answer to most questions than our head is going to give us. That being said, it doesn't say do what it says listen to it. Right? If it's Yom Kippur and I feel this deep desire to eat ice cream, I could say, oh, I really want ice cream right now. Okay, I'm aware of this. It's healthy to be attuned to that and to feel it and to be aware of it. Thank you for telling me. Shema b'koila, I'm listening to its voice. And now I'm going to make a decision, which is, at this point, I'm not going to eat ice cream. But I heard you. Thank you. A lot of the times, the requests of the body are actually going to be the thing that is the right thing to do. And when it's not, okay. It doesn't mean you don't listen. It doesn't mean you write it off, you deride it, you disregard it. It's just, no. Shema b'koila, listen to it. Now, if there's a time where the right thing to do clearly is still not to do what it said, okay. But don't just think that it's this thing that has no value because it's physical, it's material, it's tangible. That's a complete 180-degree distortion of the way it really is.
So would you say...
If anyone wants to go have a break, please do.
So you're saying, the purposes, all that, got that. Does the body are you saying the body has wisdom itself? Or it's more, we need to listen to it because we're working together, integrating?
What I said was both. Now, I think that if we go back and look at the words, it'll become apparent that when I said that thing about the wisdom of the body, that was something that I was adding. What it's talking about in the Sikha primarily is more the fact that this is about the body, so It's always going to be part of the equation. We should listen to it. And with very few exceptions, the right thing to do is to take care of its needs. If the body is struggling, you don't neglect it, Azav Tazavim, or you help it. If there is a need that your body has, you tend to it. Are there exceptions? Of course there are exceptions. No one's denying that. But the mentality that, oh, it's just the body, I'm focusing on the soul and neglecting the body, that's a 180-degree distortion. That's exactly opposite of the way it's supposed to be.
It's just not addressing the issue of it has wisdom or not. That's not the point.
Correct.
Got it.
Now, I think it's true. Now, truth be told, to me personally, I see a synthesis here with something that is in the Sechah, which is the fact that in the future, the soul is going to get life from the body. And this is my take, and it's a take that I believe in very strongly, but to be clear, it is my take, and that is that as we get closer to Mashiach, the tools and the awareness and the understanding and the ability to tune into the wisdom of the body and to hear from it is increasing exponentially, and it's a very new thing. This whole mentality and this whole approach and perspective is very new, and it makes sense. The Rebbe always talks about this, how as we get closer